Hello again. Hello everyone. After a short break, we want to continue with our couch lessons, our weekly online format that informs you about the risks, the challenges, but also about the possibilities presented by the developments in the field of artificial intelligence. My name is Jeanette and I work for the Goethe-Institut headquarters in Munich. The Goethe-Institut is a worldwide active cultural institute of the Federal Republic of Germany. We promote the study of the German language abroad and we encourage international cultural exchange. Last year, we decided to start a program called Generation A is Algorithm, a program for young adults that will be surrounded by algorithms. Young people represent already the largest group on the internet and the largest group of technology users. But they need more knowledge about AI on the one hand, and on the other hand, their voices should be heard on a political level. With Generation A, the Goethe-Institut wants to create a space for critical questions about AI as well as for testing algorithmics. We also want to provide a platform to include the voices of young people into a political discourse about AI. Our project aims to carry the discussion from expert circles into wider sections of society and to sensitize young adults to the technical and ethical developments in the field of AI. In what directions will AI develop by 2030? How will the life of young adults look like by then? How can each and every individual influence these developments? These and other questions are explored by the different formats that are realized within the framework of Generation A, and one very successful format is the series Couch Lessons. Every week, always on Wednesday, we invite researchers, practitioners, artists, and philosophers to discuss with us about different topics of AI. We have already spoken about topics like AI and ethics, AI and peace, or AI and creativity, and you can watch all these former episodes on our website. I will post a link after my introduction. Before I hand over to Martin, who will moderate the lesson, I want to inform you about the music you have heard at the beginning. It was the song Daddy's Car, created by the AI software Flow Machines in the style of the Beatles. I also want to remind you, as always, to make yourself comfortable, maybe on a couch or an armchair, to grab a cold drink, or now in winter times, maybe better, a hot drink, and to enjoy the next hour. You will learn more about AI and nature, but first we want to know what you think about this kind of paradox relationship, because most of us think of nature, of forest, wild animals, or fields as something that has so far remained untouched by technological innovations in the field of AI. So here are some questions for you. Let me start the poll. Oh, maybe Martin, you have to start it again. It's not working for me. I hope everyone can see the questions now. Yes, perfect. So as long as we wait for your answers, I would like to inform you briefly about some guidelines of our couch lesson. First, the invited experts will give an input, each about 10 minutes long, and after that we will open the discussion. Please use our chat to type in your questions during the whole time, and I will go through the chat and pick out some of your questions that we will discuss later. After the inputs, I will ask different persons to contribute their questions personally. But if I don't ask you to talk, please turn off your microphone. I also want you to know that the entire event is recorded, but we will just record the persons that are speaking. So let's have a look at the results of our little poll, and maybe I have to hand over to Martin right now because I cannot see them, unfortunately. So Martin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jeanette, and thank you everybody for typing in your answers to the questions. And so most of you actually think that AI can benefit the environment, which is great, of course. And then there is a little bit of a draw in terms of the question of whether AI can reconnect us with nature or not. So let's see what we feel after this session, the 50 minutes that we have in front of us. So hello everybody, my name is Martin Törnqvist and I'm a curator and a concept developer based in Malmö in the very south of Sweden. And with us today we have Jasmine Sherry, Craig Gansel and Katya Stamboljeva, and they're tuning in from San Francisco, USA, Atlanta, USA, as well as Lisbon, Portugal. And I'm super excited to hear them share their knowledge and experience on today's topic, AI and nature. Before we kick off, please type in the chat where you are joining in from. That's always a nice way for us to get to know each other a bit in this kind of intimate session that we're having here. And the first person to type in is from India, London, Belgrade, Tunisia, Croatia, France, Italy, Venezuela, Bangladesh, Peru. Wow, this is always the best part, I think. We can all go home now or disconnect from where we are. This is fantastic. Thank you everybody for being here. It's truly amazing to have you. And the chat is also a great place to float your thoughts and ideas as well as responding to others as we go along in the lessons. So today's topic is nature, and it's the perspective of AI that we're looking at. And in one way, the natural world is the furthest you can get from technological advancements under the umbrella term of artificial intelligence. Nature is all of which is not man-made, that has been developed through evolution for millennia. That, of course, means that humans, all of us, are nature too. And I think that's sort of an interesting paradox here. And what we do with our hands affect nature either directly or by the proxy of a click of a button. And all actions that we take have implications to the world around us. And technology and nature, therefore, needs to exist in some kind of symbiosis. And in the spring, we hosted a couch lesson on the topic of AI and climate change. And we spoke about the ways in which better systemic understanding powered by AI could help mitigate the effects of human actions have on the climate. But we also touched on the fact that AI in and of itself can contribute to the increased CO2 emission due to the vast amount of computation and therefore power needed to make use of it. But in thinking of AI and nature, we wanted to take an optimistic approach. And we asked, how can AI be used to affect the natural world in a positive way? So how can farmers increase their yield and decrease the use of pesticides? And how can wildfires be prevented from causing human as well as environmental suffering? But to get us started, let's talk about what nature is anyway and how it can be engineered by humans. And with us to do that, we have Jasmine Sherry. She is a designer with a long experience in synthetic biology and that is currently leading the Synthetic Ecologist Lab at the Serpentine Galleries in London. So please beam your energy to Jasmine Sherry. The screen and microphone is yours.
Thank you so much, Martin. I will share my screen now. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. Does everyone see my screen? Awesome. Thank you so much for having me today. I will do my best to stay on time. So I will put myself a timer. So as Martin mentioned, my name is Jasmine Sherry. I'm design director and investigator in sciences and creative practices. I come from a design background, and I've been working in the field of sensing, exploration with life forms, and augmentation for the last decade. I work across multiplicity of disciplines and at the in-betweens of what we might call disciplines, environment and spaces. So I like the murky lines in between. Today I will share just a few things about my thoughts, both about what constitutes nature and how we might imagine different technologies that we might work with, specifically AI. The methodologies for understanding and making sense and framing ecology and nature has been very much focused around visual interfaces, charts, graphs, models, simulations, and abstractions. These all happen at scales that are much beyond the human perception, both small and large. One of the things that is incredibly interesting outside of AI, but in general around scientific instrumentation and just the technologies that we build, is us always as humans trying to understand scales beyond ourselves. This is a Google Earth image, and we are trying to understand what our Earth looks like at different scales. We created instrumentations like satellite imagery so that we can make comprehension and understand these imagery beyond ourselves. Of course, this has always had a visual focus because we are visual beings, but of course we're giving this sense a lot of focus. So we have microscopes and we have telescopes and we have satellite imageries to tell us more about how we experience Earth. Sometimes I wonder if one of the best ways to begin to also reshape the way that we make sense of things is also to dismantle this idea of visual imagery and to think of different sensory experiences and apparatus. Within the field of AI, this has become really exciting because to take these kinds of imagery and take this understanding of scales beyond ourselves, both larger and smaller, to also make sense from an algorithmic kind of perspective and to be able to predict models, to be able to detect. We look at imagery and we begin to kind of build ways that we can begin to understand, shape, and go closer and further away from the ways we collect this information. So the notion of a data set comes to mind. Data set is, I guess, one of the most important parts of building a machine learning or AI technological infrastructure. What we tell the data, as we know, defines so much of our own understanding. So we ask ourselves, why do we want AI, and how could AI help us or shape the way that we create our practice, whether it's a scientific practice or within a technological practice or artistic practice. These are some of the words that I've collected or I've began to make sense for why we might be using AI. But I'd really love for everyone maybe in the chat to begin to actually also type what they think that we might be using AI for, especially in the context of nature. And in the context of ecology. So some of the things that I think about are to collect, to try to understand, to make some form of a compendium of understanding of the way that we experience Earth beyond ourselves and beyond our sensory apparatus, to analyze, to begin to make sense so that we can predict, to make sense of things so that we can make both future and past more streamlined, but also to be able to communicate these kinds of temporalities, and then to make visible. So obviously we have so much of our own limitations, and we're trying to kind of begin to test what it's like to work with a different, almost like a model of a human brain, which is almost interesting. Martin and I were having a conversation earlier about how also this notion of nature, what it constitutes. Obviously, we think of green things or we think of Earth, but also ourselves as human beings. What are we? And are we part of that model that we're analyzing and thinking, because so much of the machine learning and AI thinking comes from our own mind. In my own work, I've been really interested in data sets as well. However, these data sets look quite different. I've worked with a variety of companies and institutions, and this is one example of the work that I've done, which is collecting different protein structures and different protein shapes in order to explore biological sensors And some of the biological sensors that I was interested in this case were actually smell biosensors and chemical sensors. So the way that we can begin to also build different knowledge around, or for me to be able to understand how different living things sense and how they might be able to engage with the world outside of visual sensing. So one of the ways that for me to begin to understand this is to go to Protein Data Bank, which is kind of a data set around data space around, let's say, protein geometry and also information. So I began to also build my own data sets. Now, I've never fed this to an AI, but I wonder what kind of new outcomes this might create and what kind of information it might bring out. But if I were to begin to tweak some of this apparatus we call AI. In addition to that, so I guess here I'm trying to say that I'm thinking about the different modalities that we build data sets and what it might look like for us. Another exploration, which is more outcome, which was on the outcome side, has been around building new life forms and actually feeding data sets of what life forms exist and begin to name them. I find this notion of visualization really interesting, and also the notion of naming. So I always ask myself, what are we naming? What are the data sets we give? And how do we create new meaning when we begin to feed technological systems like AI and machine learning different ways of thinking and different ways of knowing? So I think there's a cultural aspect here as well that we must consider. Which comes to my next point, and I only have a few minutes, so I hope that I can be respectful of the time. I guess our forms of knowledge creation and making, meaning making, is defaulted usually to technological and scientific framing. And I'm interested in what other contexts in technological infrastructures might exist. So one of the things that I'm quite interested in is knowledge creation, not only around these techno-scientific methodologies, but also the social protocols and kind of the more collective protocols that we might have. This does not necessarily, when we talk about AI and ethics, we immediately think of gender or race, which is important and we must be taking it incredibly seriously. But when we think about nature and when we think about living things, it almost expands exponentially. So I think this is really interesting for me, and I'm really trying to tackle this challenge and try to work in an optimistic and critical way to try to see how we can shape and how we can work with AI. Some examples I have of the ways that other folks who are thinking in the similar line of thought, which I'll give examples, are thinking, is The Anatomy of an AI System by Kate Crawford. And she writes, from the material used to build the technology enabling contemporary network society to the energy needed for transmitting, analyzing, storing data, flowing through massive infrastructure to the material of the infrastructure, the deep connections and costs are more significant of far longer history than usually represented in AI. So one question I have is, how do we represent these histories, and how do we represent these important almost metadata that is not always represented in AI. Another one that I'd like to share that I'm really excited about recently is Radical AI Network. And I like this question that I actually found in Nature magazine from Pratyusha Kalluri. And she asks, don't ask if artificial intelligence is good or fair, ask how it shifts power. And I think in the context of nature, I think this is quite interesting to think about resource extraction and what that means beyond, let's say, just usability. And so I like that a lot. And there goes my timer. So I'll finish by saying this. Neil Postman asked these questions, and this is more on the ethics side, but I do wonder, what does AI provide for us in the context of nature? And this is a longer question that I think we're all trying to answer. I don't think there's a specific answer, but how do these technological languages occur? Who gets to participate? These are important questions that I think we all need to participate in when it comes to nature. And for that matter, I'm really excited to have launched my new lab, Synthetic Ecologies Lab at Serpentine Galleries, where the goal of the lab is to kind of begin to think about AI, synthetic biology, nature, ecology, and all these ideas of new nature or old nature, or how we begin to think about these things, both from a kind of scientific perspective, but also from a variety of disciplines, and try to bring them in from artistic, design, and creative practices. One of the areas that we're incredibly excited about is databases as well. So this is an ongoing project to try to answer and tackle some of these things, but also from an optimistic side, like Martin mentioned. So how can we think creatively with AI and synthetic ecologies? And I'll finish with this. How might we work together, empower, and think ethically about what constitutes nature and the way that we create new nature? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jasmine. And we will invite you back at the end for the Q&A. So please, everybody, ask questions in the chat, and we'll make sure to incorporate them in the discussions after the talk. Our next speaker is Craig Gansel. He is the CEO at FarmWave, working to create AI data models for assisting farmers in being better farmers. Please welcome Craig Gansel. The screen and microphone is yours.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you, Jeanette, for inviting me to this. I have presented FarmWave to probably about 16 different countries in the 7 years we've been working on this project, and today we may have just completely obliterated that. I am so impressed at the people from all over the world that I see joining here. This is really great. So thank you for having me. I don't have any slides that I'm going to share. I'll just go ahead and talk, but I'll drop a link in here to the website. You can go free, take a look, pictures. There's all kinds of things up there. But FarmWave is, we are a company of technologists. We are developers, engineers, designers, and strategists. We do not come from an agriculture background. We sort of fell into agriculture. And this started in November of 2013, when I was one of the first 800 people to receive a pair of Google Glass. If you remember that device that began here in the United States and then was around the world, and I was responsible for bringing it first to Europe and a couple other places. And I was invited to a conference by John Deere. And I was invited to bring this device as a hands-free heads-up display and how it could work in farming and agriculture. And from there, I was asked a lot of questions about how something like this would apply. So I come from a background in the Special Forces military, and then I was with a telecom company for 15 years. And I actually have been working on AI a little bit since 1995. So I've been at it for a little while, and I have seen the economic components of hardware drop in prices dramatically, which brings us to the ability today to accelerate in AI so rapidly in multiple industries and marketplaces. So I start talking to farmers and growers about how can we use this? How can we take a picture with our voice and have it analyze something? And I needed to learn what are some of the things in agriculture that we can solve for. Artificial intelligence in some ways should really just be called automation intelligence, because we are trying to take human knowledge and automate tasks, certain decisions that we might make in a few seconds or a few minutes, and make these processes and decisions happen faster and autonomously without human intervention. So we got into crop scouting, and it was about how long it takes for someone to get an answer, a farmer from either a university agriculture extension agent or a crop consultant on, I have something on my plant, whether it is a pest or a disease. What is it? What do I do about it? If they're not sure, this process could take a couple days or a couple weeks for someone to tell them, I will be in your area, I will come to your farm, and I will take a look and get you an answer. But what happens if we have weather and all kinds of other problems that accelerate the spread of that disease or pest throughout the crop? So we looked at how we could use image recognition and vision computing to get an answer in less than 5 seconds. We started partnering with 2 research facilities, 16 universities, and we started building our own database of library of imagery dedicated to artificial intelligence and plant pathology. Today, FarmWave's library is millions of images in multiple crops and their respective disease and pests. But we wanted to take it a little bit further. What are some more tasks that they do? And we found out that they will count the kernels on an ear of corn to predict the yield. How well is their crop producing this year, and what is the yield looking like? And they were doing this today, simply standing out in the field with a Sharpie and just counting the kernels. That doesn't sound very hard, but I urge you to go out in the middle of the summer when it is very hot and try that. It's not very easy. And you start rubbing as you turn the corn around, the Sharpie is coming off, so you kind of start to lose count. And so we built an algorithm that would allow you to hold it up in front of Google Glass or a smartphone and using the app, take a picture, turn it 180 degrees, take another picture, and it was 92+% accurate, and you got a result in less than 2 seconds. What else could we do with this technology? How else could we progress this? We learned that in France, a cooperative called Dijon Cereals, they go out and they count seedlings of wheat as they are coming out of the ground. And they compare that to the number of seeds and what was put in the ground. They do this by sending interns, really anyone who will go out there and count plants in a 10 meter by 10 meter area and get results. They saw that after lunchtime and throughout the course, there was a 72% decrease in accuracy because it's just not a fun job to go out there and plant counts. So how could you take a smartphone and capture a 10 meter by 10 meter area and take a picture and have it count the plants in a matter of seconds? And so we built that in about 2016, 2017. We started to continue to progress all of this technology. And just last year in 2019, we looked at how can we take our algorithms, our AI, and apply it to machinery to look at problems with harvest loss. Harvest loss is what's left behind the machine after it goes through the field and harvests the crop. To give you an idea how big this problem is, in 2019, in just the United States, in just the crop of corn, it was a $1.4 billion problem. Over the course of 10 years in soybeans in just the United States, it is over 2 trillion. Globally, this is a multi-trillion-dollar problem. And it comes from changes in climate, changes in soil and compaction, whatever the crop conditions might be like when they're actively harvesting, the operator and how well they know the machine and how to manipulate that machine while it is harvesting. And there are a lot of factors. But anybody who's operating one of these big machines cannot see all components of it. The FarmWave Harvest Vision System puts hardware devices on the header and in the rear of the combine to look at grain loss. Right now, it is working in corn and soybeans. By next year, we hope to produce models for small grains like wheat and canola and barley, and continue to progress this in other combine harvesters. But beyond just harvesting, how can we apply this to sprayers and planters or seeders? In sprayers, we look at nozzle performance. We take what we were doing with the mobile app on plant counts and stand counts and doing that off the boom of the sprayer. What is the growth stage or the height of the crop? Looking for disease, pest, and weed pressure. All of these can happen in seconds. Nozzle performance, we are even able to look at the size and shape of the droplets of liquid that come out of a sprayer and when they land on the plant to tell you how much of the surface area of the plant are being covered. The big impact on this, not only on savings in fuel and increased yield and product for farmers, is for the environment. Imagine if we could spray less and spray more direct. And a sprayer would only have to go through the field, say 2 times instead of 8 in a season. This is a huge impact on compaction of soil and the quality of the soil. It is a huge impact on the amount of pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides that are being sprayed into the environment. It's a cost savings for everyone, but it is very, very big savings on our planet and our entire ecosystem. So these are the kinds of AIs that we are trying to leverage in agriculture to bring around full circle to not necessarily produce more food, but reduce the waste that is going on today already. Things, such as the spraying and the planting. And then when it comes time to harvest, looking at those yields and comparing them to what went in the ground in the beginning. So FarmWave has a web app that is being used by thousands of growers with a high concentration in India and the Middle East to use the free mobile tool to look at disease and pest in certain crops, but even communicate with nearby farmers, communicate with agronomists and crop consultants here in the United States and other parts of the world, such as France and Germany and England. And the machine system just went to market this year in the United States. In 2021, we begin to push into South America, Europe, and the rest of North America with Canada and Mexico. Thank you very much for your time today. I urge you to take a look at FarmWave and all the information on the website. Feel free to fill out any of the forms. If you have more interest in what we're doing, we'd be happy to get in touch with you. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you very much, Craig. And I actually have a question right away for you. What's the sort of movement like? Are there other sort of companies working in this, maybe solving neighboring problems or seeing neighboring opportunities?
There are others that are working with technology like this. Some of the big manufacturers of seed and inputs, Syngenta and Bayer and BASF, companies like John Deere and AGCO and Fendt and Case New Holland are working in technologies like this as well. But most of those people are customers of ours. They all come from agriculture backgrounds, and we come from a technology background. We are viewed as being one of the companies on the forefront with 2 patents in this technology that go towards the vision computing around crop production and yields. And while others are doing it, and we do work with others in this collaborative space, we are viewed humbly as the leader in AI today in agriculture.
Cool, thank you. There will be more time for questions in just a little bit. But so we're now going to move from the agricultural fields to forests. And in the last years, we've become increasingly aware of returning massive forest fires. California and Southern Australia being the big examples, but also in places where you wouldn't expect it, such as where I live in Sweden. They are scary enough to watch on television, but also, of course, have big effects on people, animals, and the climate. So what can we do to prevent them from happening? And when they occur, what can we do to limit the damage? With us to talk about this, we have Katja Stamboleva. She's the founder of Nina Space, a company that is using remote sensing and machine learning to fight wildfires. So please beam your energy to Katja. The screen and microphone is yours.
Thank you, Martin. Thanks for the nice introduction and for the, for bridging the gap between the 2 different speakers. We are all working on different parts of nature, but we do work on nature. So I also haven't prepared any slides tonight, just because we only have around 10 minutes per speaker to speak about what we do. So I think it's going to be faster and more engaging if I just speak to you. And I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about me, a little bit about why we're doing what we do. And I also would like to take the chance to tell you more about satellite images and AI being used in different parts of nature preservation and climate change mitigation, because this is something that is really interesting for me. So I wanted to share this with you. So me as a human being, I was really good at maths in university. So I continued studying software engineering at university, which was not something that I was really engaging with. So I went to do my master's in natural language processing, which is the part of AI that deals with text. So imagine the early days of Google. Google was doing mainly natural language processing. And then I found this really exciting. I said, wow, finally, now I have the tools, both from a programmatic point of view and the knowledge, both from a mathematical and linguistic point of view, to do something exciting. So I worked in this field of area for some years. And after that, can you still hear me, guys? Because everyone froze on the screen.
We do hear you. You glitched a little bit, but please continue.
Oh, okay, cool. Thanks a lot for jumping in, Martin. Right. Yes. And after a couple of years, I was doing mainly machine translation, so teaching automatic models to translate from one language to another. And I managed to teach a model to translate from English to German in 2 weeks, which is, for me as a human being, would be impossible. to do. But then it was, this was not enough as well. It was not making me happy. So I decided, okay, what else could I do? Then somehow miraculously in my life, I busted my knee playing basketball, so I couldn't walk for months. And then I had a lot of time to think, and I decided that I'm going to use my AI skills to do something good. And then I just needed to decide, okay, how can I define what is good? I decided to use my AI and data science skills that I already had to work on social and environmental projects. And I started this by launching my first startup, which was a health tech startup, which was aiming at helping people improve their diets as means of medicine and prevention of non-chronic diseases, which are diseases that you cannot transfer by touching someone, such as diabetes or being overweight or having heart disease. This failed, but I learned a lot. And after that, I did a couple of years of consulting. I joined Amnesty International in helping understand what kind of abuse do women members of the parliament in the UK receive online. And it turns out that they are abused online just because they dare to be politicians. We also explored oil spills in Nigeria and how companies follow the regulations and laws in cleaning the oil spill before there is a permanent damage being done on the environment and on the local people there. And in Nigeria, we have a lot of tribes living in the countryside, so we wanted to preserve their culture and heritage. And this really got me excited. What happened at the end of 2017 is something like a big environmental event kind of started the spark of my new company. In 2017, Portugal burned, and it was a really big natural disaster, which was the worst in the world in terms of lives lost and property lost, not in terms of hectares of land damaged and hectares of forest burned. And Portugal is it's a relatively small geography, so when something so big happens, you really feel that it's kind of like just behind your back. It's tapping you, and it's something that is really close to you or to me as a person. So we decided, okay, what can we do using our technology to help solve this problem? So we started thinking about maybe we can use satellite images, which is something that Jasmine mentioned at the beginning, to understand whether we can do wildfire combat. It turns out that this is not the best way of us fighting wildfires, because wildfire combat starts after the fire has started. And in this case, the human race, we are mainly helpless. What we can do is we can help evacuate as many lives as possible from the areas of disaster. Then it made sense to us, okay, so we do not concentrate on the fires after they have started, we concentrate on the events before that, which means the winter and spring times before the wildfire season starts. This is something that is called wildfire mitigation, meaning prepare the natural world so that when wildfires happen, they don't grow into monstrous proportions, which are some cases of wildfires that we have seen, for example, this summer in California and last year in Australia with the bushfires. And in this case, wildfire, then we're speaking about understanding the natural world and the vegetation of the natural world before fires have really started. We can do this with satellite images, and we can build a lot of models based on satellite images. For example, we can have satellite images that cancel everything else apart from vegetation, and vegetation really pops out. And then we can use these to understand, okay, how does this vegetation change over time? Is this vegetation a forest? Is it a commercial forest or a pristine forest? And pristine forests are, so imagine the jungles in the Amazon. And for example, the forests, well, some of the forests in Sweden, they're really vast, and they're very densely populated with vegetation species. Commercial forests, for example, they're much more organized, and sometimes you can really see the lines of the trees as they were being planted. Whether we can see whether this is actually a farmland or not, we can see whether this is just a pasture where we would leave our cows eat some grass and grow. And this was really powerful for us. Why do we need to use satellite images in this case? Because as human beings, we cannot visually inspect the vegetation in a country or in a region of the world or in the whole world. But we can understand what's happening at a very high level, or actually at a very low level, given that we access satellite images, and we do have satellite images which are for free, provided by the European Space Agency and NASA, which is in the US, and we can use these satellite images to really understand what's happening around the world, not only in terms of vegetation. And this is where I start speaking about some other examples. For example, we can see genocides in the world. And how can we see this? We can just compare a satellite image of a rural village before and after. And from these images, we can see whether the village has been destroyed or not. And unfortunately, in some regions of the world, it's safe to assume that if the village had been destroyed, then its inhabitants are no longer walking the earth. We could also count refugees. For example, there were a lot of abandoned cars which were left at the border between Syria and Turkey. And what would happen is Syrian refugees would drive to the border, leave the car there, cross the border on foot, and continue their quest for a better life. It's very difficult for us humans to know how many people have done that, but what we can do is we can count the number of cars so that we estimate the number of refugees that have crossed over a certain period of time. Let me quickly look at my notes. Yes, I did mention to you oil spills, for example. Some oil spills are very, very big, and it's very difficult for us to estimate the amount of barrels that have been spilled, for example, and the size of the area that has been damaged. What we can do is we can take satellite images and see these from space. I am not quite sure whether I have a couple more minutes. So Martin, if you tell me I have 3 more minutes, I can continue speaking a little bit more. If not, I stop here. Please
speak for 2 minutes. I'm super curious to hear about how you're sort of planning to use this technology in the coming years.
Yeah, sure. We are planning of using satellite images and machine learning to build models on where do we expect to see wildfires more often happening, even though wildfires are an event which is very difficult to predict due to the fact that they are really dependent on not atmospheric conditions, but weather conditions. And it's very difficult for us humans to predict atmospheric conditions. As you see, the forecast for the next 10 days is not really accurate. Now, imagine if we wanted to predict what's going to happen, what's going to be the temperature 2 months from now. What we can do, however, is we can continue monitoring Earth and the vegetation on Earth to see where vegetation is being properly managed and where it's not being properly managed, and concentrate our efforts on wildfire mitigation in the places where we do not have good management of the forest or the lands, because this is high risk areas that burn very quickly and have the wildfire spread fast. In terms of satellite images, we can also count plastics, both on the ground on Earth and floating in the oceans, which is something that we have a lot in there. And I will stop here, give back the microphone to you, and let our audience actually ask us the questions that they wanted to ask us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Katja. Thank you also to Jasmine and Craig. And all the audience, please, or everybody participating, please ask questions in the chat if there is any. Otherwise, I will just continue asking my questions. So I'm super curious hearing from you, Jasmine, how sort of your relationship to nature has changed during the course of your work in the past years.
That's a really interesting question. Thanks so much for asking that. It continues to change. Yeah, I guess I've never really thought of nature as separately than myself. And when I came into kind of working with the sciences, there was kind of this big divide, and the way that people communicate the notion of nature has been confusing to me. Not confusing, but like there's different framings around what is nature and what constitutes nature. And for me, I've always been a part of nature. So sometimes I think there's a certain language in sciences that might separate, or even the word maybe nature can be conflated to be so many things, or something very specific when we mean something a lot larger. So how has it changed? Well, I think with the general public, when I speak around nature, people always talk about green things. So there's some form of like a bias around what the visualization or the connotation of nature looks like. And then when you go to work, let's say on a microbe, the idea of nature is like really different. It comes down to kind of, is it living? And then even if it's not living, it's a natural resource. Also these, I guess in my talk also tried to come to touch upon it. What do we constitute as nature and what do we not? Also comes down to like how we see it as useful, or how we see ourselves as a part of it. So, you know, the notion Anthropocene comes up a lot. And I'm curious about, is that the way that we want to talk about humans versus nature? For me, it's still an open question, I would say. And although my thoughts were not exactly clear in that trajectory, but I think I still have a lot of questions around, are we a part of? Where's the murky areas? When we say the word nature, what do we mean? And I bet if you ask everyone in this room, we will have very different understandings. And we might be open to everybody's understanding, but very immediately we might have different ones.
Okay, so in sort of talking about nature, the one thing that is obvious is that it's around us. I mean, it's surrounding everybody, and we're all a part of it. And so I'm curious from sort of a technological perspective. You're a designer. We have a technologist, entrepreneurs in this call as well. Who do you think is sort of missing, and what other sort of roles or professions needs to be involved in both the sort of the farming forest and the general design issues here?
That's a really lovely question. I personally always seek voices that aren't always heard, and or at least I try to. And one of the ones that I really like, I've most recently been really interested in indigenous cultures and how they think of nature. I'm really interested in fermentation and food. And so chefs, for instance, and folks who are fermentation masters or novices for that matter, and how the notion of nature is constituted within both the practices that feel very lo-fi, but they're also in some ways technological and can expand to be technological when it comes to food industry. So I'm curious about these two communities, but also ecologists, which I'm learning more and more about. I'm curious to hear from the other speakers as well.
Yeah, what about you, Craig? Who are you looking to employ next?
Well, we continue to, bring on developers and engineers to just continue to see how far can we push the boundaries of AI, right, to add value in agriculture. But we also want to know how to best conserve the knowledge, right, of today. Here's an example. There's a lady in Pennsylvania. Her name is Susan Evans. She is a world-renowned entomologist. She travels 300 plus days a year to study bugs and insects all around the world and their impact in different parts of the world as it pertains to not just food agriculture, but trees and forests and what those bugs might be doing, why they're migrating in certain patterns and so on. And I sought some of her advice when we were building out our technology for the decision-making tree, if you will, the algorithmic pattern of if you see this, what do you do next, and what to look for and identify using vision computing. And she was pretty skeptical of what we were building and its ability to work and work accurately and replace somebody like her. And I told her, I said, right, but Dr. Evans, we're not out to replace you. Here's the reality. You're not going to live forever. So how do we take your knowledge, which is very sought after today, and preserve it for future farmers of tomorrow by putting it in some sort of artificially intelligent, network that people can tap into? And it changed her perspective of why we were doing what we're doing. And so we continue to look for consultants and subject matter experts in these areas to help further that knowledge data set, if you will. Some of the pictures that Jasmine showed during her presentation early on of unique protein structures, those kinds of things are very valuable to AI, right? When you get to a microscopic or cellular level of things, whether it be agriculture and nature or even healthcare, building models that can use the anomaly detection in something like those visual classifiers of protein structures are going to help in building AI models that produce accuracy. Because look, the reality is if we don't have accuracy in AI, what are we doing it for, right? In agriculture, if we were to scan something with a phone or a drone or a satellite and get it wrong and a plant dies, that's bad. But if we put this in healthcare and we get it wrong, it's worse. It's far worse. The risks are off the charts compared to plant pathology, right? Taking it beyond just as another example of just nature and agriculture, autonomous vehicles. If we don't get AI right, the after effects are disastrous. So it's about, how do we preserve the knowledge of subject matter experts, like somebody like Dr. Evans?
Right. And what about you, Katja? What
Hi,
other perspectives are you looking to bring in?
Yeah, sure. So my point of view is slightly different than Jasmine and Craig's. And I think this is actually lovely because we're going to share a lot of insights with you guys. So I come from the startup world, and in startups, we usually have limited resources and few people to do things, right? So we need to be creative. And regardless of whether we're in a big corporation or in a small startup, being creative is very different anyway. I have been in the tech world all my life. And what I have seen so far that really impressed me, and this is something that I would like to have in our team, is having really creative people. So for example, I know a startup that has an artist as a co-founder, and this artist brings so much fun, so many new activities, and helping change the culture of the startup, that this startup is growing more and more successful because we have someone who is not from the business world and who is not from the technological world, but being there to help communicate better with the audience. And the audience can be your consumers, your clients, or just the general public, or people that you might want to be educating. The same goes with journalists. I think this is something that Jasmine said. We would like to be able to hear the voices of the people who are not being well represented usually. And if we're speaking about climate change and nature, it is important to know what's happening in the most vulnerable places around the world. And we usually, if we're in the first world, we kind of isolated from that. We do know different cultures, and we can see things on the movies or as documentaries, but it's not the same as experiencing something firsthand. So also having journalists that can capture a story and convey it to everyone so we can really feel it as our own is something very important. And this brings me to the third set of skills that I think it really makes a difference, which is some kind of a visual design. So we can We can collect tons of knowledge about climate change, and imagine that from tomorrow on, we as humanity have the answer to climate change. This is how we're going to stop it. Okay, cool. How are we going to present it to everyone so that we can collectively do something about it? And I think the best way of doing this is through a really good visual design, so that everyone can relate, regardless of your race, your age, your location around the world.
Fantastic. So you'll take on Jasmine, and I'll definitely want to have a chef around in my life, as Jasmine suggested. So thank you all very much for your contributions. I'm going to hand over to Jeanette to say some final words.
Yeah. Also, my big thanks to Craig, to Katja, and to Jasmine. And I want to mention our next couch lesson. I hope you can see it. It's about AI and sport, and will take place in 1 week. And we want to ask what role AI plays in amateur and professional sports, and what happens when AI invents a totally new sport. I also want to draw your attention to our intimate couch lesson that will happen on December 18, after 21 couch lessons on various perspectives of how AI technology affects society. We want to provide a more intimate space, small virtual rooms where you can meet with experts, and you can choose the room and stay there for 20 minutes before a new round starts. And the purpose of this format is to facilitate a conversation where experts and laypersons can meet at eye level. And we hope to see you again next week, maybe at the intimate couch lesson. And for now, I want to close and thank you for being here, and hope to see you again. Bye-bye.